Okay, welcome to Switch Your Sitch with your host, Katie Turner. Super pumped today. I've got Sophie Scott in with me. Sophie and I used to work together when I was a lecturer at FIA. So now Sophie is a course writer for Endeavour Natural College of Health. She's also a lecturer for Endeavour, qualified nutritionist, blogger, article writer for some of the big publishers out there in nutrition. So today we're going to kind of talk about what we can do, how we can be healthier, small steps we can take, how Sophie's changed her world from exercise to now qualified nutritionist and top of her game. I'm going to hand it over to Sophie to tell you a little bit about what she does right now and how she got there. So welcome, Sophie. Super pumped.
Thanks so much, Katie, for having me. I'm really excited to have a chat to you. And I wanted to share with you how I got into this industry, because it's not the typical journey. In fact, what really spiked my interest in food and nutrition was my mum. We grew up with a love of cooking, a love of nutritious food, but that kind of was put aside, and I studied environmental science and I kind of went along that path, and I ended up volunteering in Vanuatu for 2 years. I know, dream job.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was working there for 2 years doing environmental education projects with local community leaders and loved it. Went running every morning. Because it was super hot, we had to be back by 7, So I went with friends, and then one day my friends didn't want to go for a run, and I thought, well, I'm going to go anyway. I don't care. So I put my headphones on, Daft Punk, like pumping, electronica. Little did I know that I had like a pack of the village dogs following me as I was like running. And the village dogs there, they're kind of just, no one owns them. They're kind of just random. And they're very hungry. And I think they saw me and they thought, oh, here's a weak one. And I stopped and they started attacking me, like they had their teeth out, and it was very scary. And I fell over, and I've still got the scars on my legs today. It was horrific. And I get scared every time I see dogs now, which is silly because in Australia, most of the dogs are fine. But it's triggered me to say, okay, maybe I shouldn't be going running in the village like this. So I actually joined a gym, the Muscle Fitness Gym it was called. And that was really exciting. And I just did all the group X classes because I love group exercise. It's my thing, like you. I love the energy and it's just really exciting. So I did all the classes. And then one day the instructor said, hey, everyone, I'm going fishing next week. In Vanuatu, it's very relaxed. Everyone, goes fishing, whatever. I'm going fishing next week. Sophie, can you take the class? I was like, what? Like, no qualifications, no idea. I mean, I've been a participant in Group X, but never taught a class. So I taught the class. I'd practiced all my choreography for hours, and I loved it. I loved being up there, teaching everyone and getting that energy and giving the energy. And so that really transitioned my life into the fitness world. So I moved to New Zealand and started working at a gym there. I ran the group fitness program. So I taught boot camp and pump, Pilates, yoga, Zumba even. So loved it. So that's how I got into the fitness area. Obviously, I got my qualifications in fitness and nutrition, and led me to where I am today.
So do you bring that environmental sustainability into the nutrition game? Like, is that really important for you about creating sustainable meals through, what you cook, how it's grown, all of that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of Australians are becoming more conscious of their food choice and the impact that has on the environment. And that really excites me. So working in environmental education for about 10 years, I worked for the Australian Conservation Foundation, and there my job was all about helping people green up their lives. So how do you compost? How do you save energy? Can you share a car? These kinds of things. And the environment and food and nutrition are linked. You cannot separate them. Yeah. And that's why I think having both the environmental science and the nutrition is a really good combination, particularly now because more people are concerned about the issues. And I think what was a real turning point for me and why I switched from environmental science to nutrition was really reading a book called In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan. And this book brought everything together: the food industry, nutrition science, supermarkets, and consumer choice. And his mantra in the book is eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And that's what I live by now. It's so simple. It brings everything together. And when he says eat food, he means eat, fruit and veg, grains, meat, eggs, dairy, that kind of stuff, not the ultra processed extruded cereals and, that kind of thing. And not too much, I think, is really important, because you can have a good diet, a balanced diet, but if you're eating too much for your body, then what's going to happen is you'll get unhealthy, you'll probably put on weight, and that's not ideal. So portion size is really something that I talk a lot about with students and clients, because it's really the game changer for a lot of people. You can have ice cream and pizza and beer, but if your portion sizes are correct, then you can maintain that in a balanced diet. It's no problem. I don't like the idea of, good and bad food. Portions are really important. And then mostly plants. This aligns to our national guidelines and probably a lot of global guidelines. Is we're not saying only eat plants, but mostly plants, and that's what I really like about the mix of environment and nutrition together.
And that you're vegan, right? Or vegetarian? Vegan?
Well, I was vegetarian. I was vegetarian for 14 years, and I'm not now. So now I'm a meat reducer, really, or a flexitarian. I don't know what label I am now. But yeah, I was a vegetarian for 14 years, and I started being vegetarian when I went to a tree planting camp, as you do. And we were eating vegetarian meals that whole week. And I thought, I'll just keep continuing. So I continued for 14 years. And you know what? There's a good vegetarian diet, and then there's a not so good vegetarian diet. And you can be a vegetarian and have muesli bars and chips and soft drinks, no problems. But that's not really ideal. So I was vegetarian for 14 years. Now I know a lot more about nutrition. I eat meat 1 to 2 times a week, and I feel like that's right for my body. Everybody's different, and I think in Australia, a lot of people are shifting towards a more plant-based diet, and that's one of the trends we've seen recently. And there was some research actually earlier this year about who is doing what in terms of plant-based diets. So what they found is that nearly 20% of Australians are following a meat-reducing diet. So that would be like what I'm doing, having a meat maybe once a week, once a fortnight, but actively reducing their meat consumption. In terms of vegans, there's not many vegans in Australia. So about 1.7% of Australians identify as being vegan, and then 4% would call themselves vegetarians. So there is a shift, definitely. And I think it's important because in Australia, we eat a lot of meat. Yes. And we eat 95 kilograms a year per person. That's a lot. Per person. And that's 3 times what's recommended in the Australian Dietary Guidelines and 3 times the global average. So we could do well to reduce our meat consumption slightly, I think.
Yeah. And do you think that's because we are an agricultural country? I mean, I'm assuming places like Brazil will probably be similar because of what they produce. And in terms of not cutting anything out, because there was a real push towards this veganism, if that's what you call it, is it because you don't believe cutting out any macronutrient is healthy, or is it just that people can't sustain it forever?
Well, I think everyone's different. For me personally, I found that I was lacking in some nutrients. So a vegan or vegetarian diet, you can be low in your B vitamins, iron, zinc, and protein as well. So that's some significant nutrition deficiencies happening if you're not doing it right. Of course you can if you're having beans and supplementing your diet with these kinds of foods. And if you're vegetarian and you're having dairy, then you're going to get your calcium. But you just have to be very clever about your diet. You can't just go, well, I'm cutting out a food group and then not do anything about it. You need to really add in some extra good foods. So I think that's that's really the message, is that we're all different, but really make sure that you're listening to your body. You know, and I feel sometimes I'm like, well, I need to eat some meat today and I feel better for it, and I don't feel guilty or bad about it. And I just make sure that I pay a bit more and I get really good meat. You know, I'm going to get meat that's been ethically raised, that's organic. And yes, you're going to pay a little bit more, but hey, I'm not eating as much. So, you know, pay more, eat less.
And coming back to that portion size, is like, why is it that we are feeling like we are eating so much more than ever before? Is it because of the McDonald's upsizes, or is it the availability, or what does it come down to?
Well, so many reasons, actually. Portion size is a big deal, and even the plates have got bigger.
Yeah.
So the plates have got like 20% bigger in the last 30 years. So if you've got a big plate, the research indicates that you're going to put more food on it. So what I suggest to people is to take your hand and have a dinner plate the span of your hand. Right. That means you can't load as much food on there.
Yes.
Yes, you can go back for seconds, but here's a tip for seconds. Serve yourself in the kitchen, not at the table. Don't bring all the big bowls of food to the dinner table. Serve yourself in the kitchen, take your portion, go sit down at the kitchen table and spend time. So we know that after 20 minutes, that's when you feel full. So wait 20 minutes before you go and have seconds, because the chances are that you actually fall. So portion size is a big deal. If you're having desserts, choose a really small bowl, because you can still have a dessert in a balanced diet, but just don't eat, you know, the whole tub of ice cream, for example. Take out the bowl. Same for big packets of chips. We don't want to be going to reaching into the chip bag, because you know you're going to finish it. So get the chips out, you want, put it in a bowl, and then wrap that baby up and put it away.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
What about alcohol?
All right. So the alcohol guidelines have recently changed, actually, Katie. So they've reduced. Now the recommendations are no more than 10 standard drinks per week. Used to be 14.
That's pretty good.
So 10 standard. Now, I personally think that's still quite a lot of drinks per week. And a trick for alcohol, and I know that recently people are drinking more, eating more. One little trick is to reserve a couple of nights for your drinks. So my boyfriend and I, we say, okay, Friday and Saturday nights, that's when we can have a drink. Maybe Sunday. See how we go. But when it becomes a regular every night thing and you're leaning on it for your way to relax, then that can cause health issues down the track. So I think, you know, like everything, have a little bit, enjoy it and move on. You know, we don't have to feel bad about having things that make us feel good.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is the guilt factor. So you're qualified, you blog, you're a lecturer. So what about the general population? Like, we talk about influencers out there because they are starting to screw things up from a personal training perspective, from a business perspective. Now, as a business coach and mentor, I'm seeing people out there with absolutely no qualifications, calling themselves the same thing. They're making shitloads of money from it. But what are influencers doing for the nutrition industry?
Well, influencers are doing a lot, actually. They have a big responsibility in the nutrition space. And Endeavour College, where I work, we just did a research study, actually, and we asked Australians, do you check the qualifications of the influencers you follow? And half of young people aged 18 to 24 don't check the qualifications. So this is a real concern, especially in the health and wellness area, where there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation being dished out by people who are not qualified. So we're calling on influencers to be honest with your followers. Mm-hmm. Tell them about your qualifications. And if you don't have any, then go and get some, you know, because then they'll trust you. And then what you're talking about is actually based on the evidence, and it's based on research and science, not just opinions. And I think influencers have a really big role to play in the health and wellness space, and it's unethical and irresponsible to be dishing out information that's just not true, or it's just based on one person's experience.
Yeah, we've seen Instagram change up how it promotes influencers now, in terms of it has to be transparent about being sponsored ads. Hopefully we will get to a point where you can only call yourself a nutritionist or promote certain things with appropriate qualifications. Yeah,
Absolutely.
what do you think about the higher education, uh, what would you call it, institution in itself? Because I know Endeavour do deliver differently to traditional universities. I went back to do my Masters of Public Health last year, and I spent my first term with a very well recognised, where I did my undergrad in economics. I spent my first term doing an assignment where I had to print out a red arrow and walk around and find two public health signs, and this is at a master's level, and then reference them. So I feel like there's a big lag in higher ed being taught by academics. Like you said, when you went into fitness, there's a real art being able to take a whole lot of information and then engage an audience and deliver it in real time. So what do you think Endeavour do differently to, let's say, traditional higher education?
Well, at Endeavour, it's really about holistic health. And that's what I love. And that's why I want to work for Endeavour. And that's what I do, because it's not just about the nutrients in the food. Mm-hmm. It's about mental well-being. And they'll offer lots of different courses, in Chinese medicine, in massage, in naturopathy. So it's not exclusively nutrition science. And that's what I really like, is it's that holistic approach. Yeah. And it's really a focus on whole foods. Rather than worrying about calories or macronutrient counts and things like that, it's definitely that whole approach. And I also feel like Endeavour, because they've been doing this a long time, they're very attractive in terms of getting the best lecturers, and the best lecturers want to work there because they know the environment. It's got a good culture. It's honest. People are happy. Actually, that's one of our values, is happiness. What kind of organisation has happiness as one of their values for staff? I think it's amazing. They look after their people, and that has a flow-on effect for students, because students then can feel the passion coming through, whether it's attending campus or online streaming, or even in the written activities and the digital learning that's coming up now. So yeah, we're a bit different.
Yeah, and that industry experience, like, I think that's vital for any person delivering education out of that traditional academic. They're two different skill sets. Somebody can be really great at writing and research, but may not be able to deliver it and apply it in real life. And I think that's what Endeavour strive to do, is really get lecturers who are applying it, who are current in the industry, and know how to do that well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what can our listeners do? What are 3 things that our listeners can do today to be a little bit healthier than they already are, without putting too much stress or, trying to isolate their lives? They can still enjoy. What are 3 things do you think that they could do?
Well, the first thing, and this is something that I really enjoy, is walking. So don't feel like you have to do a full-on workout or even go to a gym. For people who are starting off exercising, walking is the best way to do it. So go for those 10,000 steps. And that can not only be a good, gentle fitness regime, but also so good for your mind. How often have you gone for a walk and come up with the next idea, or being creative in that space? So that's really important. And that's something very easy to do. All you need is a pair of runners and off you go. So I really love that as a tip. The second thing to do would be, when you're shopping the supermarket, is to shop the perimeter. So go around the outside. Okay. That's where all your fresh fruit and veggies are, your meat, dairy. Those inside aisles is where all the junk food is. And once you've gone down the aisle, of course, you're going to pick up stuff, right? So start just by shopping. Try to just shop the perimeter.
That's a great point. I never even realized that. But if you think about it, like the milk's down the back, the bread, the fruit and vegetables, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And supermarket psychology, there's, heaps of books written on that. I'm actually reading one at the moment called The Secret Life of Groceries. I mean, most people would walk past that book and go, oh, no. But I'm like, yes, bring it on. Because it's so interesting the way a supermarket's designed, and now online online supermarkets, how that's designed to make you buy that junk food that's on special all the time. Like when a chocolate bar is not on special, right?
Yeah.
Always on special.
Right.
It's easy to buy that stuff. And what I always suggest to students to work with their clients is you can just say no once at the supermarket. Then you don't have to say no every single time you open those cupboards and you're seeing those Tim Tams in your face, right?
Right. Yeah. That's a good point too.
Yeah. So if you have Tim Tams, put them down the bottom shelf at the back. So you have to like go over the pots and pans to get them.
Freeze them because I hate cold Tim Tams. So my husband puts them in the freezer and I'm like, you can have that. So good.
Absolutely. Doesn't work for vodka though.
No, that's good cold frozen.
So there's the 2 tips. The third one would be to eat more in the morning. So there's been considerable research for people who are trying to lose weight, which is a lot of Australians actually. So we know that more than 2/3 of Aussies are overweight or obese at the moment.
Wow.
And a lot of people are trying really, really hard to lose weight. And one tip would be to eat more in the morning. So often people will skip breakfast or they'll do intermittent fasting, which is just skipping breakfast. And why is that? Some people just don't like breakfast. But if you dig down a little bit deeper, the number one behavior that I see clients want to change, and also students who are working with clients want to change, is reducing the amount they eat at nighttime. Because so many people eat more of their calories and their food at nighttime. Why? It might be the only meal they're sitting down with their family. So you imagine you've got your chips and dip before while you're making dinner, maybe your wine, then you slide into dinner, and then you've got dessert and maybe sitting on the couch having some chocolates. So you can see there that there's like a few meals in a short space of time. Now, what we know is that if you leave 3 hours after your last meal and before you go to sleep, that's going to be the best for your health. So say, for example, you finish eating at 6:30 at night, wait 3 hours. That gives your body time to digest the food before you go horizontal, because sleeping is not the time to digest. It's the time to rest. It's the time for blood cells to turn over, muscle tissues to build. You don't want to be uploading your body with food at that time. But if you've skipped breakfast, you're going to be really hungry and you're going to push all your calories to the end of the day.
So what about calorie counting? What are your thoughts on that? Is it viable? Is it sustainable? Is it good exercise at the beginning to make people, because like you say, people forget, I think, about all that snacking, how many calories they, it's almost like, if it's not breakfast, lunch and dinner, it doesn't count. So
yeah, absolutely. So calorie counting is quite popular, particularly in the fitness industry. You'll know people feel that if they count their calories and they have some kind of control. So the interesting thing about calorie counting is you're counting what you're putting in, right? And the idea is that if you put in less than what you're putting out, then you'll lose weight. But how do you know how much energy you're putting out, right? So you might have a Fitbit, which can, look at your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. So your BMR is the energy that your body needs just to survive. So for your heart to beat, your lungs to breathe, the blood to be pumped around the body. So your BMR. Now, unless you've done a DEXA scan, which is when you're horizontal and you're going through a scanner, then your BMI is always going to be a bit of a guess. So if we don't really know how much energy we're putting out, if I go for a run and someone else goes for a run, we're going to be using different amounts of energy. So if that's a bit inaccurate, and then counting calories. Okay, so let's talk counting calories. How do you do it? Okay, so you might use an app like MyFitnessPal, for example, and you spend time and you select different foods. What if you go out for dinner? You're going to ask the chef, how many grams of olive oil did you put in there? Excuse me, I just need to know, and then what are you going to do there? Also, how do we know that the amount of calories that is in the food is going to be absorbed by the body? We don't. In fact, research indicates, when looking at almonds and cashews as examples, that the body only absorbs 85% of the fat within that almond. Why not 100%? Well, the fat is tied up in the fiber of the almond, so it just goes straight through the body. So if you're calculating your calories based on the databases, it's not accurate as to what your body will absorb. So the whole thing is a bit of a guess, to be honest. And I think if people are using it, you know, to kind of have a look at how am I going, then that's great. But what I suggest to people is ditch the calorie counting, spend those 10 minutes that you are trying to work out what's going on, chopping up vegetables, because you're going to get better results, because only 4% of Aussies eat enough veggies. So get those veggies in, high in fiber, make you feel fuller for longer. You won't have to worry about the calorie counting. So I'm not a big fan.
Okay, great. Well explained as well, because I think I've used it as a basis for my clients only because a lot of people aren't aware of even the nutritional value of food. Like, we do it for a job, but the general population come in and are unsure as to, you know, what even macronutrients are, or how things make their body feel, or even their mind feel. That sugar rush to a sugar drop, you know, understanding how that affects both your body and your mind. So we currently have this 2/3, you're saying, of Australians overweight or obese. Then we have the other extreme of the industry where we have people who are almost body dysmorphic, or you know, have anorexia or bulimia, eating disorders. Where do we sit? How do we get people to the middle of that? Is it a less focus on body image and about how we feel? What, from a nutritional point of view, how do you envisioning us, seeing us get more towards the mean than either extreme?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone's on their own journey, and to find that balance is a lifelong project. You know, for myself personally, you try all different things, and you listen to different things, and you read different things, and it can all get very confusing. You know, what are we actually meant to be doing? And that's why I like to come back to that motto of eat food, mostly plants, not too much, because that really sums it up. Is that food? Is that actually food that your grandma would recognize? That's an avocado, yes. That's an extruded Fruit Loop, no. Yeah. It's quite clear what the foods are that we should be choosing. Intellectually, we know what the foods are that make us healthy, but why are we not choosing them? Because the other things taste better, right? So taste
gratification, right? It's like, oh, stick it in my mouth. Woo!
Exactly. And there's no harm in doing that if you just have the one mouthful. But the problem is when you have the whole bucket of ice cream, for example. And we know that it's the science of diminishing returns. You know, after that first mouthful of ice cream, then the second one's good, but not as good as the first, you know, and it goes down. So by the end of the bucket, you're like, why did I even do this? I feel like rubbish. And then the cycle happens again. So when you're talking about eating disorders, you know, that's a significant problem for a lot of Australians, particularly now, and it's actually increasing. So we need to help people in that area, and it's really in the area of mental health. You know, all of this we're talking about is not actually the food, it's mental health. So it's our emotional eating, it's our reward system, it's our coping mechanism, things like that. And for a lot of people, that does seem to be food and alcohol, because it's easy, it's cheap, it's readily accessible everywhere. You know, we don't have to walk to the garden and actually work to get our food anymore. We can just few taps on our phone and we can have it delivered. It's just too easy. And I think that can be really harmful for people as well when it is so easy.
Yeah. So coming back to the influencers, as general population, like we've seen this in the fitness industry for quite a long time, you know, and then we had people like James Smith who've come out, whether you love him or you hate him, he's actually a qualified exercise physiologist. So, you know, his background for exercise is actually qualified. How do we get to that point in nutrition? I mean, are we as a consumer asking for our influencers to actually show us their credentials?
We want them to be qualified. We want to understand that they know what they're talking about. And I think in the area of nutrition, everyone's got an opinion. You know, there's the keto diet followers, there's intermittent fasting. What's better, what works is all individual, and you shouldn't just follow something just because someone else does it. And I think that these kinds of diets can be really harmful for people. And all these rules, we know that dieting is the #1 influencer to develop an eating disorder. And that's really tragic, because eating disorders are a significant issue. And I think influencers have a role to play here, because, you know, if you see big influencers in the US promoting weight loss lollipops and crazy diets and, you know, things like this, significantly reducing calories to people feel so horrible about themselves and guilty if they go over their limit. Like, we don't need this stuff, right? Let's get on with our lives and eat real good food and wholesome food that makes us feel good, and have the occasional treat. I always suggest to students and clients, have a little treat that you like every day, you know? Yeah. And so many times I've seen with clients, I'm going to take out chocolate. I'm not having chocolate ever again. And I know that's not realistic. It's not going to happen. Well, instead of having the whole block, let's see if we can buy some mini ones or whatever the situation can be. And I think when we put too many rules around food, it is likely that people can develop disordered eating behaviours. So having these structures and rules, and we know that in Australia, 4% of Australians have an eating disorder. They're living with an eating disorder now. And that number is probably higher, actually, because there's a lot of underreporting in this area. And in the fitness industry, we can see probably it's a little bit higher than the average population, because there's that pressure and that kind of thing.
Also, I found, working in the fitness industry, it is an avenue for people who already have existing eating disorders to be masking them, right? Because they can enter an industry that they think that, you know, it exists on calorie counting, over exercising. So it's actually masking, which can be detrimental to their clients, because they're then passing on poor advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, a lot of the people with eating disorders will hide eating disorder behavior. So that might be that they don't eat in public. They might eat privately or binge eat privately, things like that. Or they say, oh, I'm full, I don't want any more food, you know, in public. So these kinds of behaviors can be really tricky for those loved ones to even identify. So people can be living with someone with an eating disorder and not really know, because people with eating disorders can go to extreme lengths to hide them. And in Australia, we know that a lot of people have an eating disorder, and the causes are quite complex. So yes, in the fitness industry, there is that image issue that's everywhere. And I suggest, when you're following influencers, really make sure that you're following people that make you feel good. If you see images that make you feel bad or not good enough, don't follow them. It's that simple, you know, because if you're seeing that every single day and you're like, I'm not good enough, I don't look like them, then that's not going to make you feel good. So really, you want to use social media, not let it use you. Right?
Yeah, make conscious decision making, I say, and don't lend your emotions. I always say with social media, don't lend your emotions to social media. Lend them to your friends and family, because that's where they're most important. And on social media, people can be whoever they want to be. Right, I've seen that for a very long time. And when I did interview James Smith on a podcast, he was saying that friends of his in the UK were taking 50 or 60 shots when they were at their peak performance, and then rotating them through socials for an entire year. And yet on the other flip side of it, they'd put on their 10 kilos back on and were enjoying life. So you can be whoever you want to be. So for any of our listeners who want to switch their sitch and move into the nutritional game, what do you suggest? Where do they start? Because there is a plethora of information out there.
Yeah, definitely. So the first criteria is you need to be interested in food in some kind of manner. So it might be preparing healthy meals, interested in nutrition, but also, more importantly, is helping other people. So that's a really important skill that you need to have as a nutritionist, is the desire to help other people to reach their goals, whatever they might be. And also interested in research and finding out information, because yes, there's a lot of information out there. And I spend a lot of my time researching. I love researching, and I love reading journal articles and finding out what is the common consensus here about this particular issue. And nutrition science is complicated. Why is that? Well, it's difficult to do clinical trials with nutrition. So you can imagine this group of people, you're going to do this diet, that group of people will do that diet. Off you go. Now, can you imagine trying to work out, are these people sticking to the diets? They're telling us they are, but we're not really sure. So you don't really know unless you've got them in a lab environment. And how long can you do that for? You know, we're not looking at 20 years. So the best data we have for nutrition is observational studies. So we're saying, okay, we're looking at these people over here. They tend to be doing this similar things. They're eating lots of fruit and veg, maybe meat occasionally. Okay, that seems like the way to go. So nutrition science is tricky, but you do have to have an eye and a desire to research in my field anyway, in course writing. And you need to study nutrition. So researching on Google doesn't count. What you need to do is you need to get a qualification in nutrition. So at Endeavour, we offer short courses. So you can dip your toe in and find out, is this for me? Is this the kind of career I want to do? And that's how I started. I did a short course in nutrition before I then went on and did a full qualification in nutrition. So that's a really good way to go, just to say, okay, yeah, this is really interesting. I want to go further. So get your qualification. And then what you can do with nutrition is so varied. You know, I'm a course writer. I do a lot of media, but you can also work in a clinic environment as a nutritionist. You can run corporate workshops. So I've done that as well. So a lot of corporates are wanting to have nutrition advice for their staff. You can develop recipes, you can work on retreats and be involved in research. So there's so many job opportunities, and it's not going away. The health and fitness industry is just going to get bigger and bigger, and growth is big year on year. So yeah, really good space to be in.
And what's the difference between being a dietitian and a nutritionist? Because to give information out to customers, what do you have to be able to practice it?
So dietitians would typically study further than a nutritionist and get a master's, and they would typically work in a hospital setting. So say, for example, someone is having intravenous food, a dietitian would work out, okay, how much XYZ macronutrients need to be in that, or if they're having meal plans and things like that, a dietitian will do that. Dietitians also work in clinics, so that's just an extra step. A nutritionist can do all those things, but they don't typically work in a hospital setting. So they're very similar in what they can do, but a dietitian would study further.
Wow. Well, I know your time is precious and you're researching probably as we speak. Thank you so much for your time. So people can find you at Endeavour. Is there any other media that you're on, or your social media handles that people can follow you at?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can follow us at Endeavour College, and they can also go to our website, Endeavour College, and check out all the blog articles. We've also got events, heaps of events, free events that people can come along to as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sophie. It's been awesome as per usual. And just dispelling a few of those nutritional myths, because it is an area where there is a lot of grey space at the moment and people aren't aware of what's really true and what's not. So thank you again for your time, and I'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie.
Thank you.